We'll start off with side by side, so let's hear you sing. You ready? Raise the roof. It won't tell what you're doing. The guttering's on the inside. Now, wait a minute. This sounds like an asthma clinic. Try it again. You haven't paid. Go on. That's it. Oh, come on, come on. You know, overall, just look upon this stage as our front room, right? We're having a bit of a do. I've opened a tin of salmon and we've got some lettuce. And
Muhammad Ali is taking some punches now. About 8 seconds left in the round.
Bell rang. Ali went back to the corner. He finally, the nightmare he'd been awaiting in the ring had finally come to visit him. He was in the ring with a man he could not dominate, who was stronger than him, who was not afraid of him, who was going to try to knock him out, and who punched harder than Ali could punch. And this man was determined and unstoppable. And Ali had a look on his face that I'll never forget. It's the only time I ever saw fear in Ali's eyes. Ali looked as if he looked into himself and said, all right, this is the moment. This is what you've been waiting for. This is that hour. And do you have the guts? And he kind of nodded to himself like, you got to get it together, boy. You really got to get it together. And you are going to get it together. You will get it together. He nodded some more, looking as if he were looking into his maker, the eyes of his maker. And then he turned to the crowd and he went, Ali Beaumier. And 100,000 people all yelled back, Ali Beaumier. And this huge reverberation of the crowd came back into the ring.
Les Dawson, the British entertainer, and Muhammad Ali, the American boxer there, in a pretty good example of problem solving. A couple of good examples of problem solving, where both adopt a flexible, creative approach to a series of challenges, to adapt to those challenges, to meet them, and then to take things forward. It's sort of a great metaphor for cumulative self-talk, where you're developing these competencies, these skills to problem solve, to meet the challenges that come your way, so that if anything comes along where you are flustered, you've got the knowledge of thinking, well, I've done similar before, I've got the framework, I've got the structure, I know how I can start to tackle this. You've got various options that you can pick from. To engage flexibly, creatively, to adapt, to meet the challenges and to move forward. Now, the resources page on the website starts off with a number of worksheets. Now, this is, before you get proficient, you've got to have a good grasp of the basics. Both Dawson and Ali clearly had that, and you can develop those skills too over time. But you do need some scaffolding to start off with, some structure, some stabilisers, if you like, to be able to begin to get into the process. And that's what those worksheets are for. It's what the whole page is there for, really. The books starts off with Atomic Habits by James Clear, a really effective book, a worthwhile book to read, to get you to be a bit more productive and effectively productive. Really good book. Then Ensouling Language, about the creative process. The best book I've read on the creative process by quite a margin. It's not a well-known book, but it's well worth reading. You don't only use it for writing, it does impact your audio, your video, and so on and so forth. And a couple of sociology books, The Sociological Imagination, where C. Wright Mills says we can all really be sociologists, and we can psychologists, whatever. And he tells us how to go about becoming a sociologist with the sociological imagination. Thinking sociologically goes into more of the concrete stuff. The sociological imagination is a bit more theoretical, philosophical, I should say. But both worthwhile books because, for example, because in modern Western societies, it's increasingly become the case that they've become centred on the individual, that there's been an overemphasis on the individual, where you need to understand the group and the structures in society, how they influence you, how you can influence them, and so on and so forth. Classic example is psychology, where it seems so many people want to go for talking therapies. You know, there's a waiting list on the NHS that's pretty long. Well, what a sociological imagination enables you to have is to take a step back and evaluate the pros and cons of something like psychology, and say, well, these are its strengths, these are its weaknesses, here's what I do off the back of that. So you can, again, creatively, flexibly adapt and figure out how to take things forward. The external resources go back to dealing a bit with psychology. You do need a combination. You do need to draw from these different influences, and it deals with cognitive biases and psychological defences, for example. Now, you do need an understanding of those, but you also need an observing self, an observing objective self, to be able to see, well, because the discussion around self-talk is it's dominated really by positive and negative thinking. Think positively and banish the negative thoughts and stuff like that, which is a bit unrealistic. A greater emphasis on the positive stuff does come about with a substantial approach like cumulative self-talk, but that alone isn't enough, because without observing self, without an objective self, you can't really tell to any great degree what the really positive stuff and what the really negative stuff is, because they can come in different guises. Some bad things can look good, some good things can look bad. With an observant, objective self that is flexible and is creative and is adaptable, you can sort of figure out what really is the positive and negative stuff. And there's a degree of substance behind it that's, where you can't just, where deep in the back of your mind, you're not just thinking, oh, I'm only really thinking positively for the sake, not for the sake of it, but for, to banish the negative thoughts. You're always going to have them. You need a degree of flexibility and creativity to have a substantial relationship with positive thinking. But so there's your basic structure, your basic framework, your stabilizers, if you like, to get you to the stage of knowing the basics, so that you can then develop and mold cumulative self-talk or whatever to your own requirements, to your own competencies, to your own skills, and you're developing skills off the back of it. What is it? Give a man some fish and he'll eat for a day. Give a man a fishing rod and he'll eat for the rest of his life. Sort of thing. That sort of adage. And basically, you're getting these basics bedded into you, so that ultimately you can do the flexible stuff, you can do the freestyle stuff, you can do the free-flowing stuff. You can get in a state of flow where things really do just come from the ether, and it's like a eureka moment so many times. This is one of the values of it. where you often wonder, well, how could I possibly be capable of thinking stuff like that? So effective can it be? And so one day, maybe, hopefully, this is what I hope, that you'll be able to turn around and think, actually, I'm really glad I tried that.